Well, I think today we're going to try to tackle just a little easy, light reading subject of God. Who is God? What is God? I find it very interesting. For all the talk of Jesus and Muhammad and gods in general, Christians especially, since that's what I know, so that's what I'll speak about, have a profoundly lacking understanding of God. For example, if you ask your average Christian, what is God? Who is God? And they'll say God is the creator of the universe. God is everywhere. God is all-knowing. God is all-powerful. Jesus is God. Is God Jesus? Yes. Are they the same thing? No, yes. Yes, no. Is the Holy Spirit God? And they'll say, yes, of course, but no. So they're all three things of one God, and the answer is no, yes, no, yes, maybe, yes. So Christianity has a pretty good, at least conceptually, they have a pretty good grasp of what they believe Jesus is and what he represents. But there's an unbelievable lack of knowing how to address the nature of God. An atheist will claim that it's the lack of evidence of a God that is the number one source of their disbelief. So on one hand, you can have one group of humans use the lack of evidence as the source of their disbelief, and another group of people that will use their knowingness of a God that there's apparently no evidence of to produce chaos. It is the knowingness of what God is and does that has killed probably more people than anything else. So it's ironic that I'm going to give, I don't know why, maybe it's not ironic, it's a strange subject to come at with, since there's almost no way to prove what I'm going to say. For example, if you ask me if I believe in God, I'm going to say, yeah, of course I do. And they're going to say, do you believe in, and insert which God? And I'll say, well, no, that's silly. But then they say, so you believe in God? And I'm like, well, you have to believe in God. Can I describe your God? I'm like, I can show you your God. Would you like to see God? You can see God everywhere. And I want to take this opportunity to remind us that I am in fact not of any religious belief system. I hold no religion. I hold no atheism. I hold no agnosticism. I am just simply a guy that is here And that is no small matter. To dismiss the here-ness of here is profoundly ignorant. To dismiss existence as a cosmic accident is almost as dogmatically ridiculous as only understanding any religion from a literal point of view. Like, of course, this is magical. And of course, somebody made it. And of course, I can't prove it, but I think I can make a good case for what I'm about to say. Or at least I can make a case for what the person who wrote this book that we're trying to unravel in a sensible way can make. Because if I go back to the beginning, what I'm trying to say is not only is the Bible true, it's very, very true. It just isn't true at all in the way that it's told, which is an unbelievably strange story, right? How could that be? And one could say it's almost as if somebody wrote this truly profound work of art and then someone else found it and said, well, we can't have this getting out. Let's just twist it. Or it was created by Twister. I mean, I literally don't know that answer, but I can honestly say that I'm going to show you what I believe it's saying, and we'll go from there. I'd like to begin by just doing a quick Google search of the word God. Right? Let's get this one taken care of. If you just type in God, it is a wild ride of just imagery. And gods can go anywhere from all religions of all types, but there seems to be, at least in a Western understanding, there's, for whatever reason, there's sort of a bearded guy image of God. There seems to be this, where did it go? There's this look we have of God. And at some point I will go into the old man with the white beard and the white hair. I'm not going to do that today. But it's anything from Jesus to Krishna to an old guy with a beard. An old guy with a beard. And that's such a strange thing, because if you pin somebody down and ask them, do you really believe in that God? In this guy? There's like a universal denial. Well, no, there's not that guy. That guy is not God. That guy's... And then if you ask somebody, is God a person? They'll say, well, no, God's not one person. And you say, well, does God have a body? And they'll say, well, no, God does not have a body. But then you go to certain religious texts, even ones of a Judeo-Christian nature, and God has an enormous body that is thousands of miles long, and like, well, where did God come from? And so it's like a circle, a loop. But generally speaking, from a Western perspective, which is what I have, God is not a being in the sense that you're a being and I'm a being. God is a spirit, right? He's an eternal spirit of love. And I think it's a good starting place. God is an eternal spirit of love. He knows everything. He sees everything. And yet he can be angry and destroy things. So you don't want to be on the wrong side of the wrath of God. But you definitely want to be on the right side of the love of God. And when described at times, at least from a surface level, there's beings that sit around a throne of God and worship Him. So God is worthy of worship. In fact, it sounds like a praise and worship song. But then you get back to the first statement where there's a profound thinking of God. There's a great thinking of Jesus, but there's a very small thinking of God. So, in our first episode, we talked about in Genesis, and we'll go to that. In the beginning, God created, and it goes through how God does all these things. And then when God makes man, it says, let us make man in our image, in our likeness. So at least and I should have a caveat. More caveats. This is a caveat-full episode. Nothing I'm going to say is not going to bother you. Probably. Depending, right? An atheist would be bothered by my argument that there is a God. A Christian is going to be bothered by my description and explanation of what God is. A Muslim will be offended. Everybody's going to be somewhat offended, probably. Maybe not. But the weird thing is, if you took all the dogma out of it, just listen to what I'm going to say. In addition to not being affiliated with a religion or an atheism or an agnosticism, I am not a Freemason. I do not believe in Gnosticism. In fact, I'm 100% sure Gnosticism is pretty bad. I'm no things. I'm not anything. I'm just a guy that believes that there is in fact a creation and there is in fact a creator. So just based on Genesis 1, I just showed you, I'm not going to show you again on that one. There is an ourness to God. And if we just take those words on face value, we are in the image of God. But then if you take my lessons on what a man is, and a man is a country, which thing is the image? Is it the man individually? Or is it the country? Which of those, or is it both, are the image of God? How can there be more than one God yet be one God? I mean, the very first commandment is, you shall have no other gods before me, and love God with your heart, whole heart. But if you have two gods, automatically, or three gods, or 4 million gods, how does that work? But this is probably where I'm gonna say something. I don't know that I would even refer to it as controversial. It's just not standard. But it is sort of standard. It's going to sound pseudo New Agey. I am in fact no fan of New Age. New Age is just it's a glittery version of Gnosticism, and I'm against that. So that's out. I'm not a Buddhist or a Hindu. And I'm not even saying all religions don't have at least some nuggets, right? If they didn't, people wouldn't follow them. So, yeah. And then in the garden, God is walking with Adam. God is talking to Adam. He says, don't do this. He's talking to Adam and Eve. He says, don't do this. He's walking with Adam. He puts him to sleep and does a surgical operation on him. He walks into the garden with Adam and Eve and discovers their newfound nakedness. He gives them clothes. Right? All within the story we're referring to. We haven't passed this point yet. So here is a multi-being, non-entity, eternal, all-knowing, everything being, but yet seems to be in a body and can interact on the human plane, but yet not interacting on the human plane is the very reason for atheism. And not following my God is the reason for most wars. And the advent of religion is the original sin. So, I mean, there's no part of this that isn't a viper's nest of trouble. When I was a kid, I remember the first time I heard about the founding fathers were deists. And I always thought they had some concept of an architect, a creator, but they didn't necessarily, they thought that the God of the Old Testament was kind of a jerk. And that's not an uncommon thing. If you read the Bible in a certain light, a certain literal light, God can be quite unflattering. So, here's my best guess. I'm just gonna shoot it out there. I believe first that the Bible was written by somebody who was writing the history of mankind using analogies of empires and nations as people. And there's a word in Greek for that, a personification of a larger thing. But I believe that author or authors, or I don't know, was it was almost as if they were writing a how-to guidebook for rulers. And in this book, and in my understanding, which I have come to agree with, and there is the off chance that, like every other human being, I have fallen into a delusional well, and I live in my own thoughts, and I've created a reality that I want real, and it's all as silly to you as everything is to me, right? And just because I say it out loud doesn't make it true. But just because I say it out loud doesn't mean it's a lie. I honestly believe what I'm about to say is true. And I can honestly say I have no idea how it works. And just on a symbolic level, if you follow the rest of the book, it works. Even if it's not true, it's true for the story. So I believe, in fact, I'm going to steal from our founding fathers. And if we just go to our founding document of our founding fathers, who were George Washington was the head Freemason. So already I'm stepping on landmines. I've claimed I am none of these things, yet I might accidentally support a Freemasonic idea. I don't intend to, but it could come across that way. America is the United States of America is we have a unique constitution. I was recently studying the French Revolution, and I stumbled across a very interesting sentence, and it was something to the effect of, the American Constitution was focused on the people, whereas the French Revolution was focused on the state. And as a general rule, constitutions tend to be state-centric. But we, uniquely, in the history of the world, or at least as far as I know, I could be off, is about the people. And I believe God. Dust I'm dust. You're dust. Dust is one person. Gathering the dust and then making clay out of it with knowledge, and then forming that clay dust into a man that represents a nation. People are strange. I would say, based on my life, that all people in general, people as a group, humanity, in my experience, is good. Portions of it are bad. Everybody's bad occasionally, but as a general rule, anywhere you go in the world, you're going to find exceptionally more numbers of good people than bad people. And if a group of dust is a man, and if man is in the likeness of God, and if you took all the men in the whole world and the world itself, the earth, and the people on the earth, and the animals in nature. All of it is God. So where religion tends to go wrong, especially Christianity, and I don't know how they can't see the unbelievably hypocrisy of what I'm about to say. During the fall in Eden, the serpent, God worried that man could live forever. He could put his mind to whatever and do whatever and live forever. And there was this worry that you would become all-knowing like God. So there's this idea that God never dies. And then there's this other idea that a country could figure out a method where it never failed and was a country, so like an evil regime could a boot stomping on the neck of man forever, right? That's the end of 1984. Like, that idea is out there. This global elite, fourth industrial revolution, Homo Deus, we will create the God that doesn't exist and become that God, and we will merge with machines and gather godlike powers. And then once we do that, we will become immortal, eternal, omnipotent. So there's this idea that the ultimate evil is to become God as an individual speck of dust. So in my understanding, we the people are God. At least in the story, right? At least if you reread the Bible and always replace God with the people. And it's not as simple as just the people, right? It's God is love. People tend to be loving. If you go to any country and you speak any religion and you go to any family, yes, there's family issues, but love is universal. And if you think of humanity, yes, humanity is God. You shall have no God other than taking care of humanity. They were like God, deciding what was right and wrong. That's God's choice. That's the people's choice. The shepherd is there merely to watch God's sheep. And we are God and God's sheep. And the role of a leader is to care for the people, not empower and enrich himself or herself. We, as humanity, have lived forever, and we will live forever. We collectively know everything and see everything. And somehow, and this will become more evident as I unfold all this, there appears to be some kind of strange, downright mystical power of the universe, which is in vogue these days. It's often called manifesting. And it's used for selfish, gross, mundane purposes for the most part that I can see. And it's been used by secret elites to garner power. And so there does appear to be it is the essential heart of prayer, right? If I ask God and I believe He will answer my prayer and I act in faith, then that's like the secret formula of miracles of God, miracles. So somehow that same power is your Big Bang, is this mind of God awoke. And this is where it sounds Buddhist-y, or it sounds New Agey, or it sounds David Icke, and they've all got good points, is we are all one manifestation. And it sounds woo-woo. I'm fine with that. But just do this quick experiment. See if you have a better... number one, science can't explain consciousness. They claim there's a decent chance it's a simulation. The underpinning of Christian belief is that you return or you go to another place from here. I guess my difference is I'm saying there is no other place but here. This is all there is. Earth and the people on the earth. That's the entirety of everything. But one of these two things has to be true. And if you watch this, one of them can't be true. And if you also have the same thought, then that can't be true. So, one, I am the only thing that exists. I'm it. I am having an actual experience, right? I have internal thoughts, and I have dreams, and I have feelings, and things hurt, and I am in possession of this body. So on one level, all of this is only for my benefit, and I'm the only one. Right? And I think almost every person I've ever talked to has had some toying with that concept. It's an easy conclusion to reach. The other more interesting and quite frankly bizarre one is that you are having the exact same experience at the exact same time. And the fact that we're all having it together. For example, if there's a vein of quantum physics that's basically gotten to the point where it just says everything's just a chemical in the brain, right? So there is no anything, and it's all just, there's no there. We just create the there in our brain. So everything is in our heads. But if a bus drives down the street, we will simultaneously all see the same bus. So either that's not true and only I see the bus, which I'm not advocating at all, or we all see the same bus. But if we're all of a separate mind, how are we having a collective experience? Unless we're all of the same mind, having unique experiences. So in that way, I very much believe in God. And He's very much real. And when I die, I will very much go be with Him. And I am just carbon. But yet I'm something else, right? There's a thing in me. And I think where people go wrong is believing that they can become all of the things. That's your ego, right? And it's Freudian at some level, where I have to face I can simultaneously be of God and be nothing. I can and I have free will. Like, many people may be upset that I'm saying this, and they say, well, you're going to hell for that. And I would think, so God gives you free will. So the only rule is there's no rules. But the goal of the rulelessness is that you love. And so heaven is found. Both heaven and earth are found on earth. Or both heaven and hell are found on earth. Most people are simple-minded. And I think that's part of it, right? I look at an IQ chart, and it's mind-blowing, and it's very difficult to get your head around. The average IQ is 100. The average. That means, statistically speaking, half of the people on Earth have less than 100 IQ. Now, somehow with the magic of math, that isn't quite right, but it seems pretty close. 100 IQ is not a lot, right? That is a fairly simple person. And if you get down into 80 or below, you start getting into special needs, and those people and a huge chunk of the population of the earth is extremely old and extremely young. So vulnerability is vulnerability and inability is baked into the equation. And there's two options. Bend the world to your will, or love. So, if we go back and we reread the stories of Adam and Eve, let's do that real quick. When we start in chapter 2 again, and humanity planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there they put the nation whom they had formed, and out of the ground those people made every tree grow that was pleasant in the sight, for good and for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And the people took this country they had made, and they put it in the garden to take care of it. And the people commanded the country, and humanity commanded the country, saying, the spirit of humanity, the spirit, this non-physical spirit of goodness, they said, we made this thing, take care of it for us. And whatever you do, don't abuse your powers. Here, we will take care of you, but do not abuse your powers. Because if you do, there will be hell to pay. Right? That's the between the lines reading. And then humanity realized it wasn't good to just have a group of people, but it needed a guiding force to make sure that the simple, the needy, the downtrodden were cared for, that everybody had a home in this new home. And he divided the people of that country into different groups, essentially according to their abilities. Some people are smarter and more capable of doing difficult tasks and understanding difficult concepts. And some people are happy with a simple life. But it only works when they're all working towards a collective goal. And they all have they value the similar things in the world that a culture provides them. So humanity provided that for civilization's sake. But the people whose role it was to make money saw how they can manipulate this to their own ends. And they convinced the people to think in a way that benefited them. And the good, loving spirit of humanity said, well, and then Adam and Eve realized they were naked. They were just like everybody else, and they were vulnerable, so they needed to set themselves apart. They were naked, and they were ashamed, right? So now they're guilty of things, they're ashamed of things, and they're vulnerable to things. So they put clothes on. And the spirit of humanity said, why have you put this separation between humanity and yourselves? This is not going to work. So that's the story. And when you see the wrath of God, and I'll prove this time and time again, it is 100% the force of humanity bearing down on unbearable situations, evil kings, tyrants, the like. It's just told in a way where if somebody came along and told you the wrong way to look at the story, you would see it that way. But God, humanity has a way of making sure the right thing happens. Evil can try, and it will try, and it is trying very hard. But it's just not going to happen. Because God is a jealous God, and He will have no one before Him. So when you see names like El and Yahweh and Jehovah and Jesus, they're not real. Just like God isn't real. But God's very real, and they're very real. Jesus is one of the most real things, and we'll get to that. But they're also conceptual, right? So real meaning real. But a larger force, a larger guiding force can take on those names and act as they are created, right? And they have limitations and hiccups and positives and negatives. And some people say, well, God looks like a hot mess. How can He clearly know everything? Humanity collectively knows everything. Nations and the history of the world is a mess. But the average person, for all of history, is a good person. But people can be guided into bad places. And that humanity can take a role of grossness. And you could say, well, how could a God let this happen? Well, how could you let this happen? So, in conclusion, we created this place. And through my children, through their children, through their children, through their children, and through their children, will live forever. But I, as a speck, am weak and mortal, egotistical, and broken. But together, and only together, can we build heaven. And if we devote our lives to building heaven, what a good life we've lived. Because if we think that if we understand that we are all one thing, part of you could say, well, I won't benefit from 1,000 years from now. But that's missing the point. Because number one, that's a terrible way of thinking, and number two, it's not true. If we're all just a piece of God, and this spirit that inhabits our body that is clearly absent when staring at a corpse, and clearly we can't die in that sense. But since we're so attached to the body and the the sense of ourselves, that thing dies. And there's apparently no memory. It's not to be remembered. It's not intended to be remembered. It's intended to be experienced. And we are intended to build the garden. And I think that's about it. And if we take these first 4 lessons and really just add up the pieces, you could begin to see how it gives a pretty decent groundwork for understanding the rest of the Bible, which, strangely enough, as a non-religious person, is full of truly inexplicable and, dare I say, divine things.